Thank you. Mr. Anand, would like to know your experiences. You were here just a while back for the TED Talk, if I'm not wrong, right? So I was there to listen to it, and you explain in detail about your journey. So how do you see your organization evolve? And you talked about that evolution also in the TED Talk. So could you just describe the challenges in the scaling up that you've had in it?
Thank you. Just wanted to give a small snapshot of a comparison if it is required for all of us over here. I did my engineering and then my MBA. I got into a typical IT sector job, and my only job was to take care of computer systems, networking, antivirus, IPS, firewall, integration, co-integration, application servers, database servers. Everything was my life for almost 15 years. And later on, I thought that is the only way I can make my career. And there was no kind of a situation which I got where somebody can actually mentor me. There's something more to life. So in one way or the other, we just thought of doing something like a nutrition drive for school going children in a very remote school. And after taking up that work, let me explain what has happened. First of all, I was very, very, very new to this kind of a social impact program, or doing it in a village kind of a thing. So we have to set up a trust. Then we have to set up an auditor. We have to set up a finance model in place. We have to set up something called as a legal lawyer. And later on, we need to issue annual reports every year. We need to go back and tell the governments about what kind of work we are doing. We need to tell to the government school children about the impact of this nutrition drive, which we do in the morning. We need to go back and tell to our corporate partners about the work which has been happening all through the process. We need to employ people which are required for the operational work which is done in the schools. Can you imagine 15 years back, I was not into this. The moment I started taking this particular independent social sector activity, I got almost 7 to 8 things which are getting a responsibility into my mind. And out of all these things, you also get an exposure to come and speak over here. Now imagine if I worked in the same thing like an IT company, do you think I will get an opportunity to speak at a TED Talk? Definitely not. So what I meant to say all the people over here is that please try to look at how you can independently start working on your own, because your mind, your heart keeps telling you something more which you can do. The restrictions which we have is because of our corporate careers. We have our own business management, senior management coming forward and telling us. And to answer the question which Mr. Pratik has asked, he very specifically asked, for the 21st century, what is that which is important for the current generation? The current generation needs something called as self-confidence. I very appreciate the point one person came and spoke over there that I am fearless. I am also kind of shameless. That's what is important for us. When you're trying to work in a social sector, you got to go back and tell them why you're working, for whom are you working for? Who are your beneficiaries? For me, the beneficiaries is children. And in this whole process, we have also gone through a lot of challenges. Here I see sustainability as a service. I'm telling you, most of you know infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. That's what we learned in our typical IT sector. Sustainability as a service is very important for all of us. It happens for us in our own family life also. Imagine if you are not available to take care of your family. That itself is telling you sustainability as a service is zero. So my clarion call to all of you over here, since he has asked me the challenges for me addressing the morning nutrition drive. Today at this point of time, we serve close to 90 lakh children. Now somebody comes and asks me, how are you handling 90 lakh children when we can't handle 2 children at our home itself, serving them breakfast or lunch or dinner? 90 lakh children, ensuring security is there for the food which is provided. Government also appreciates the work which is being done, but at the same time, government also looks at what kind of security standards we have. What if something happens to a child in the nutrition which we provide? So these are certain challenges which we have to take it up and we have to absorb it. In this process, we learn a lot. And I felt, over here in this platform, sharing these kind of things will also motivate many of you over here or people who are watching live to make up some activities which will help the children who really need our support. So I feel, in this conversation, in this process, Pratik ji, you should probably also give us an opportunity to probably share each of our stories to explain how we are able to how we are able to undergo so many other transformations inside, internally, and then, how we could articulate it outside.
So I would like to know actually how about these transformations. So if you'd like to tell.
So as such, I have three important things to share over here. The first transformation, which I felt we were able to achieve, is giving it back to the society is a miracle. Giving it back to the society itself is a miracle. I mean, Jaipur foot, you know, people who don't, I have my own brother. I have to tell this, and he's physically challenged. And I knew it. I used to take him to the hospital. And, after his foot got amputated, my mother and me, we went to hospital. I was only 8 years old at that time. And we had to do a Jaipur foot for him. And after that, I have understood that you are a miracle by itself. Body is given to you by God. Why is that you're only looking at selfish needs? Go back and do something for the children who really need it. That was the first transformation for me. The second transformation, inspiration. Somebody who is actually right in front of you, you would have seen him where you have actually helped them to give them some support. Later on, they become very good in their studies. They become academically so great that they take up good positions. You find inspiration in them, which means you're investing on it. And I have two children over here. Two students are here, standing over here, who finished their graduation. And right now, they're actually taking care of another 70 to 80 students. Okay, so as an institution, we just don't promote giving nutrition. We promote education. We promote healthcare. And in this process, the outcome is always to see whether the child who is benefited is not only looking at his or her own requirement, but also supporting the other causes, like supporting other people. And the third and very important point over here is motivation. All of us over here, we also need some motivation. A platform like this helps us to come and speak about the work we do. And that's my motivation. And I thank TEDx and also IIM Bangalore for at least choosing us to come and, giving us an opportunity to speak. Because if you don't call us like this, I don't think so we'll be motivated more. So inspiration, motivation are very important for us in this whole process. Thank you, Pratik.
So what you're talking about is, so the climate change has brought about a fundamental debate about how we are doing things in generally, where we have profit oriented organizations whose legal mandate is to make profit, and charitable activities or social impact is considered to be this extra that these companies are giving. And then and now we have a 2% mandate for funding. So that funding then goes to the NGOs. So a peculiar kind of a model, and the kind of motivation that you were talking about was driven, and we also talked about compassion, we talked about sensitivity. So it seems like a different kind of model where NGOs and certain other corporations are driven by intrinsic motivations to help and benefit society. So that's what I wanted to discuss now, that how do you think NGOs can shape firms in the 21st century? It's a hard question in a sense that do you see that the NGO mindset of sensitivity, compassion, inclusion can actually shape how business gets done in the future? And I like Professor Amit to talk about it first, because he mentioned about these businesses that show a greater degree of sensitivity. So, and I would like to learn from all of you if you have seen your work shaping how businesses and other profit centers are doing things, or if your work is bringing about transformation in how broadly business and things get done in India.
Yeah. So coincidentally, I was in a panel discussion here yesterday, and I was moderating a panel on ethical impacts of AI. And we were talking about ethics, and ethics as something that will allow for what we are looking at in terms of technology transformations to become sustainable. Now, understanding of ethics as a sustainability lever for something that is currently being so talked about in terms of transforming the world, and grounding it into an understanding of what the society is important, is important for organizations. if organizations who are for-profit corporations, big tech as they are called today, if they are working on artificial intelligence-based technologies, and if the grounding is not into ethics, and if that grounding of ethics is not built through an understanding of what are the social values that are important, the products that are going to be built will not be sustainable. And therefore, there is for, let's say, glamorous looking technology businesses, it makes sense for them to be grounded into some sort of what is considered not very kind of, or it is for someone who has already spent 15 years in a corporate sector, and then there's calling in life, and now you're I don't see it from that perspective. There is a lot of value that can be brought in. There are, in terms of organizational structures, we see a lot of DNI, diversity, inclusion, sustainability verticals coming in. They probably are not being considered at this point. There's still cost centers, but I guess they have to become product profit centers in respective organizations in days to come. And there, the kind of work that organizations outside the for-profit corporate sector do is important. And I would also say that even organizations like some of ours, and we see that we are in the process of creating social impact. That's what organizations are there for, whether you are a for-profit organization or you're not. You are there to create, or you are there to transform societies. You're there to transform or make societies easier and better and more livable. That's why organizations exist. So that has to be there in the DNA of organizations. You do lose out sometimes because of the kind of pressures that you are in, but this is a realization, and therefore different organizational forms are required. You need organizations who have profit as priority one. You need organizations who have, let's say, impact of a different kind as priority one, to exist and coexist and learn from each other. So let's say not-for-profit organizations like the one that I am part of, or that I am representing today, they have to learn certain kinds of practices that the corporate sector has perfected. But how and whether to apply it will depend on what they are doing. Every corporate sector practice may not work, or in fact, does not work within the corporate sector also. If you are in a small and medium enterprise versus a large enterprise, you will not have the same HR practices. Your HR practices would be different. So just as you have those variations, here also you will have variations, but it's good for organizations to understand what is the value that a different organizational form brings. And from that perspective, this enablement of the corporate sector, for-profit sector, and the not-for-profit NGOs through the CSR route over the last 10, 15 years has been very good. It's a learning on both sides. I guess what we need to understand is it should not be the corporates driving how social impact organizations should be doing, but they should also be willing to understand that there is value in terms of learning from these organizations. Yeah, so that two-way interaction is
I'd
important.
like to focus on that conversation. What can other organizational forms like governments and firms learn from NGOs, and that can be scaled up by them? So whether we are talking about inclusion, whether we are talking about entrepreneurship, or we are talking about this curiosity and joy of learning, in either of these situations, clearly, ultimately, the scaling up has to be done by multiple types of organizations. And how can the DNA, or the NGO DNA in a sense, which takes more time, which is in the sense that it takes more time to understand, to have empathy, to have compassion, and do things with greater understanding, rather than being completely objective oriented and checklist oriented. How can that DNA become more and more prevalent in other organizations also? If, yeah, sure.
Let me try and answer. It's a slightly complex question, but I'll touch upon a little bit on the fact what Amit also mentioned is, and transition to the question that you're saying, is that, in the non-profit versus profit versus the objectives that we are kind of really looking at, what definitely has happened is that the resources come from the corporate, but the non-corporate, non-profit sector actually implements it. In that sense, it's now more in terms of the innovations that they are ready to take on. That's a change that has happened. There are more not projects, but programs. And then you are looking at products and compassion that is slowly kind of seeping in, understanding that this sector's work takes time to implement, time to reach out. Okay. Doing good is hard. Okay, there's a very good philosophy that doing good is extremely hard. So therefore, that sensitization is really going in, as Amit already said, that relationship has kind of now taken a direction. And in the first panel, it also mentioned that we are now ready to kind of really look at capacity, bringing the entire structure and excellence of the corporate sector to doing things that are working out. So therefore, there is a good direction to move on. Now, coming back to your question that, okay, so how does it kind of pan out? I think we are at a very sweet spot. We are neither here nor there. We are kind of really understanding how to work with each other, figuring out stances, and then taking the steps slowly.
Let me rephrase the question.
Please.
So we always talk about how corporate can teach discipline and efficiency to NGOs. We don't talk enough about how NGOs can teach
Compassion.
understanding, patience, compassion.
Back.
So how to take that conversation forward?
I think the conversation has already started, and it's slowly making its way. You see the panel in the morning, and there are donors who are really looking at capacity building, looking at impact on a long term. There are projects and programs that are long term. I mean, 3 years, 5 years. There's a patient wait for the impact to kind of happen. I think that necessarily has been the change that has been brought about in this sector. Whether it'll accelerate, I think we are reached at a point where it can sway in either sides. We feel it should go positive, and it has a much bigger scenario to work upon, more very structured. Okay, it will get organized very well on the ground, and it will make a larger impact. That's my feeling as of now. It's not a question between, say, corporate or the NGO sector, and how do you kind of pass on. As you work together, your own way of working starts to kind of rub on each other. That's the way to go forward, and that sensitivity is already there.
So, Mr.
I'll just quickly add to this. See, we increasingly now talk of design thinking. We talk of human-centered design. We started talking about wicked problems. We have started talking about systems thinking. So all these are, I think, a fallout of this kind of engagement over the last 20, 30 years.
Okay. Mr. Shrishel, your
Yeah,
experiences
so-
in education.
See, Pratik, I think to answer your question, there are 2, 3 points which I'd like to bring in is, see, always we have a mindset of saying somebody is giving you the money, somebody's funding, we call him donor, right? There itself, you're keeping a distance there itself. So as organization at Agastya, we consider everyone as a partner. So when you are bringing him as a partner, so kind of you're sharing your responsibilities with them. Second is we strive to do a lot of co-creation work with these partners. So any problem or any project which we want to launch it, and we consciously sit with the supporter or the partner and see that this is how the challenge is, this is what the plan, what we have. And we would like you to be part of this co-creation. Right? So when he becomes part of this co-creations, he understands all the nuances, what sort of outputs we are going to get, what sort of outcome. Is that really we are going to create impact, or it's just going to be a report? Or so if this project has to really create impact, then how long it is going to take, and so on. Right? So that's the second part where you are onboarding him as a co-creator. right? Of course, you have the structured, detailed project and everything, but in every project, if you onboard him as a co-creator, then there is a huge possibility he understands the nuances, and he also try to carry this in his organization. And he also kind of try to bring in a lot more talents to this project and try to understand what we are doing. The third very important point I would like to make is, so how do we inspire these companies or donors to invest on the mission, not just on the project, right?
Yes.
So say, as we have a mission of sparking curiosity and creativity and nurturing confidence. So how can you kind of, motivate and influence these partners to invest on the mission? So when you're doing that, you're really making them aware of what you're doing. And once they are convinced, then only they come and do that. So these are some of the opportunities which you get where you're kind of convincing and encouraging partners to become and learn from you, not just giving their time, money, and so on. So I think that's the way where you can kind of help and shape these corporates.
So a follow-up question to all four of you is that all of you are working on four very hard problems in four different domains, and you are making large impact, but still in the scale of things that, I mean, where work needs to be done, I mean, there's a lot to scale up. So what are the key challenges and opportunities you see in that scaling up? And I'm not talking about the challenges only for an NGO, but also for the mission. That is the mission of educating and sparking curiosity in all the children of India, and inclusion in all organizations, or STEM education to all disabled children, etc., etc. So what are the key challenges that you see going forward, and how can we, in your understanding, make these missions much more scalable? And why is that not happening, or if it is happening, your thoughts on it? And
I'll start with this. So, see, I think when we use the word scale, the word itself is very subjective, right? You need to bring in the rational. And in case of us, as I earlier also said, there are more than 265 million students in the country. And we being one of the world's largest hands-on education program, and we reach close to 3 million students every year. 3 million. Out of that, 1.5 million we do with the direct engagement. Direct engagement in the sense, one of our Agastya facilitator directly engages with the beneficiaries. And the remaining 1.5 we do with the indirect approaches. Having said, if you see the larger perspective, it's less than 1%. We are one of the largest in the world, but we are reaching less than 1% of the country's need, right? So then it becomes, how do you scale? Right? So that's why 2 years back during COVID, we set ourselves, how can we shift from organization to movement? Right? So then we decided ourselves that by 2032, we would like to impact 100 million students and 1 million school teachers. And this is our second year, and we are quite on track, right? So to do that, what we are doing is we are leveraging a lot of technological innovations, and we are revisiting our programs and structures on 3 fundamental elements. One is, we call them as 3 R's. So how can you reach more? And how can you give the highest richness, a sort of quality, and so on, at the low cost? And the third is the rate. So reach, richness, and rate becomes very, very important in driving your programs. And so we sat back and redesigned a couple of our programs, and we brought some of the programs. How can we take our Agastya's pedagogy and the spirit of Agastya to masses?
what do you mean by richness?
Richness is sort of the quality or aspect of, you should not be losing your richness at the cost of reach, right? So you need to have that right balance. So considering those factors, we devised a lot of new programs using the technology. But yes, the challenges are, as you rightly asked, if you see the Indian context, each state has a different policy, and there are a lot of vernacular languages followed. So any one lesson plan, just I'm giving an example, one lesson plan or session plan you come across, and currently we are in 24 states of India, and that session plan has to be translated into 24 languages, and then need to be proofread, and then you need to train the people in their local languages. So vernacular languages in the Indian context is the biggest challenge, right? Second is when you get into these rural parts, getting the right talent to scale your programs is the other challenge, right? Third, of course, as a non-profits, many of us, I don't know about others, but in case of us, one area where we feel little more is we do create a lot of impact, but we fail in communicating the impact to the partners. So how do you equip and develop the capacity of the non-profit so that they are very well equipped and able to communicate what they are doing in the best? The fourth is, of course, the funding, right? The resources. And so how, again, you are dependent on some of the corporates or HNIs, but how do you kind of increase your source of fundings so that you're not just dependent on one or two people? So you have a lot many sources. At the same time, as a programs, can we have a flexibility in our program? Say somebody wants to give you 2 lakhs, but is that I have some program for him as well? Want somebody who is funding you 10 lakh rupees. So the flexibility and the design in our program, I think that's another key element. If lot of the organization does not have that, but if you consciously develop that, I think then you have funders also in place. So put together, the challenge is human resource, the way you communicate and showcase your work, and then funding.
No, that was a pretty comprehensive overview of the challenges that go in scaling up. Anyone would like to follow up?
See, from the challenges standpoint, what I understand is from the rural village exposure which we have, each of us should take this as a responsibility. That's where it starts with. So biggest challenge which we go into a school to start an education program or a healthcare program or a nutrition program is the inclusiveness. What is right now happening is, mujhe kya hai, mera kya hai. Okay. If I go to a village also, if I go back and tell them I'm here to do something for your village, they will not accept. Okay. Because the current situation is like that. So the grassroots change has to happen. Now the current generation, definitely we can't change. The children over there should be taught what is good and what is bad. Why you should do this and why not that. Why you should have good hearing to good news. Why you should not spend yourself on something like a gossip. So it all starts from there. The grassroots has to be changed. The transformation has to happen. Why? Because if you make a change in the child's perspective, right, after 5 years, when he becomes like an adult, you know, he will automatically come forward to do something which we want to appreciate and do it in that particular village. I have transformational stories like that. Children whom we have actually spent time when they are in the 5th grade, 6th grade, today they are actually on their own going to school and serving children. Now you go back and ask them, why are you doing it? I feel it's a responsibility for my village to do it. So my first challenge is that transformation of the grassroots levels is important. And second, as what the other colleagues were also saying, it's equally important that we also realize the sensitivity of being responsible to do something for our side immediately. Please say immediately, because after this whole session is completed, please think about it. There is a nearby government school at my home. Can't I go there with a pencil box or a books or a chocolate for my son's birthday or for some other important anniversary? Because the problem is we don't do it. When if we are not doing this program in our own perspective, okay, leave aside the school. We have some housemates at home. Do we really think about them? What are the children doing? What is their daily food intake? Who is there to take care of them? So we have to change. If we don't change our perspective, right, I'm sure this challenge will continue to be there. And last but not the least, whatever said and done, I also see that, at a personal level, if we are not even thinking of showing our gratitude to our own parents, I'll tell you why, because many a times we always think about doing something for outside. Okay, pehle ghar ko samalo. You have your own parents. How many times do we go and talk to them? How many times did we go and do service to them? So service has to start from the parents itself. So I am saying, based on my experience, ghar pe jao, please take care of your parents. ask them what do they need. So it is like a social inner transformation. Once you have this inner transformation, you don't need to think. Miracles will definitely happen. I feel these are something which are more emotional, Pratik, but I feel this is the grassroots for us to make a change. If we are good, you have that quality, in your character. You are also being very humble, grounded, making sure that you can actually make a difference to your own parents, to your own, neighbors, or to your own mates over there. That is good enough. Naturally, the laws of nature will see to it that you are responsibly, efficient enough to take up the next societal work. So I feel that that's the most important part over here.
That's very nice. Anyone else?
A quick note from us. I think your question is pretty much valid, but the point that I wanted to make here is that, see, no one organization or NGO has the ability or the capacity
Yeah.
to scale. I mean, period. But let's be very firm about it.
Yeah.
However, there are a lot of NGOs. There are 30 million, I guess, in the entire country. So is it a possibility that whatever we do and whatever is really working and has an impact on the ground, can it be translated through partnerships?
Yeah.
Is there a way to do that? That fundamentally is the way to scale. It is still not going to be big, but it is still a small, coin in the ocean, a rock in the ocean. But even if we can do that, then our impacts and our directions have the ability to scale. That definitely is the case that I believe going forward. Collaboration within NGO circle has to be there, and there has to be some kind of a organization or an association. We should not boil the ocean, but we should clearly get together to say that this is where we want to work. At least that connection has to be established. So that's probably the answer I feel for the scaling.
Potentially, many NGOs are doing different things in different places, and if things could be a little bit more, collaborative between them, potentially one NGO can do another mission potentially when possible.
Yeah.
Etc. etc.
And for all NGOs, the local connect is very important. The trust and the
Yes.
things that they talk about, it cannot be brought by one person working in multiple areas. It has to be different people working in different areas. That's how it will happen. Yeah, sorry.
Professor Amin.
Yeah. Just kind of reinforcing whatever Anand and Benjamin have talked about in terms of this. The two aspects. One is collaboration, partnerships, not only amongst NGOs, but in terms of creating or in terms of looking at maturity of the entire ecosystem. So if I were to talk about the disability sector, where our organization is more active, I guess, and it's not only the different kinds of organizations. There are disabled people's organizations. There are assistive technology makers. They are so they are important. There are academic institutions, schools, higher education institutions, government. So all of them are important, and all of them have a role to play in terms of the maturity of the ecosystem. So trying to look at the ecosystem, what are these different organizations? What is it that they bring to the maturity or to addressing issues around disability that exists in our societies? And it could be at different levels. It could be at the level of technology. It could be at the level of say access. It could be at the level of mindsets, which is very important. So I guess coming together, willing to work, willing to ensure that we are all contributing to the maturity of the ecosystem is very important. Mindsets are very important for scale up. So I completely agree with when Anand says that if we change our mindsets, let's say if you're looking at children with blindness, we have or a very dominant mindset is a child who is blind does not need to know or does not need to appreciate photography or should not or will not be able to draw. Why should a child who is blind be denied the opportunity of expression that comes in through a visual medium? So there are all kinds of mindsets, mind blocks that we have created for ourselves. If we change those mindsets, a lot of a lot of ignorance will go away, a lot of awareness will happen, and we will probably be much more inclusive in terms of our, let's say, so when we said, for example, I know Professor Srinivasan was talking about IMB being a 99% disabled friendly campus, but we would probably design this auditorium in a much better way. Why would we say that a person with a wheelchair has to sit here only? If he wants to or she wants to go and sit there, we should be designing our spaces in that manner. And that would happen by the architect or by the civil engineer who would do it, because they would have gone through that mindset change that a person who is in a wheelchair should not be or should not go a different route, a different ramp, and be bracket or be satisfied sitting in some corner of a room. So I guess mindsets changes, and that is very important for all of us to bring about, is a very powerful way of scaling up.
So I think we covered quite a lot at the inner level and a mindset level, and also at a systems level. Things like associations that we potentially are ecosystems that we need to build for these movements to scale up. Because no individual organization can really do one thing. We are short on time, so I'd just like to invite our panelists to say any, concluding thoughts that you have.
I just have one concluding thought, call to action. Let's not take this as another program and we are here to listen to it because we are spending our time. Time is valuable. Call to action. Whatever you do, wherever you are, please have that compassion. Please think about your people around you. Smile at them. Talk to them softly, sweetly. No hard talk. See to it that your mind is at peace at any point of time, because this will only drive us to do something good for the society. Thank you.
It's difficult to kind of close remarks. I think we have come a long way, and I feel very buoyant and positive about this entire sector. There are 2, 3 things that as a sector that we need to really look at. What, as Amit said, can we build an ecosystem that would be clearly a great way to collaborate with each other and really figure out whether we can do whatever impact that we are doing at a much, much larger scale. And that's what India needs. We need to do it now. The second point is that we are right now in the phase where we can definitely look at experiments and innovations. I think that window definitely is open. So let's try and do experiments and figure out what works, what doesn't work, so on and so forth. And the third thing is not only look at program sustainability, but also organizational sustainability. How do you go forward? Whether we work on only funding, whether we work on multiple models, financials, other scenarios, all that design thinking has to be kind of brought in. So that is the closing remark from my side.
Yeah. What I found very useful is not to look at, or I have a bit of a kind of a tension when we use this term giving back to the society. I think it's not giving back, it's always taking. Yeah. So there has to be a sense of gratitude and humility. Whatever we are trying to do through the organization is not giving back to anyone. We are taking, we have whatever joy, satisfaction, motivation, trying to work along with people in the process, trying to learn a lot. So I guess as we work in this sector more and more, we do realize that there's nothing that we are giving back. We are enriching ourselves in the process. So I guess the mindset of charity has to go away, because that is what makes us believe that we are giving to someone. Yeah, we are enriching ourselves, we are learning in the process, and that is something that has to be seen as a sustainable value of being part of this sector.
Well said, Amit. So I personally feel that sustainability is a responsibility. Don't keep it separate, and you can do that in every routine work what you do. So two things I would like to mention is, so be curious and ask questions, right? So the recent American study also shows that the children between the age group of 2 to 4 ask 98% of the children ask questions. And by the time they get into middle school, it drops to 58%. And by the time they're out of the school system, only 10% of the school children ask questions. And this is in the context of Western countries. And you can just imagine what would be the situation in India, right? So I just ask all of you to be curious, ask questions, right? And at the same time, I know that there is a forgetting curve on our head, right? The famous father of memory research, Mr. Harman, says, whenever you're introduced to a new information, after 2 hours, 42% of the learning is lost. And I'm sure that all of you are out, and after 2 hours, whatever you heard, 42% of that is out. So I quickly ask you to, whatever you have understood, whatever aha moments which you got from these sessions, please make a note of that and try to act on them, right? So that's what I would like to say. So live the spirit of aha and haha. And I also thank EPGP team for providing this opportunity, and Mr. Arsu and Joy for coordinating, and EPGP team. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much to all of you for this fascinating discussion. I learned a lot from it. We don't have time for Q&A, I'm sorry. So we will have to move on, if I'm not wrong, right? And so we can have conversation later. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I would request Professor Prateek to now give the mementos to our panelists as a token of appreciation and gratitude. We'll start with Mr. Shrishel. Thank you, sir. Next is Mr. Amit. Thank you. Mr. Benjamin. Thank you. And last but not the least, Mr. Anand. Thank you, everyone.